that. You know, I don't think anyone's written anything, but it's just but this is an example of what I'm talking about imbuing the object with meaning because of the event. You find these meaning in these events, and you give it that significance. We were talking earlier about how Crowley has in chapter 2 of book 4 a section where he just kind of goes off and kabbalistically interprets nursery rhymes. And he's like, well, he's using the Kabbalah to find the meaning in these nursery rhymes, which, you know, probably isn't there naturally. Of course not. But he's demonstrating this is how you find meaning in events. So you use this meaning-finding tool as a way of understanding the significance of the tools that you will be using in ceremonial magical rituals. The next thing I want to talk about are the robes and the circle, which, like the cup and the disc, like the sword and the dagger, I put into a similar category. Because the robes and the circle are both different ways of expressing the magical intent of the magician, the magical allegiance of the magician, and creating a space. The circle is a space. Like, and I highly recommend that people get chalk. Chalk is good. You know, you can draw on the floor with chalk. You can clean it up pretty easily. It's very basic. Some people like to have big cloth circles that they fold out. The circle is basically an expression of the identity of the magician, but it's also a way of concentrating the energies that you're invoking and creating a distance between you and the energies that you're evoking. The circle is the partner to the triangle, which, when in evocation, you conjure the spirit into the triangle. Now, Crowley played with this quite a bit. You can see there's photographs of Kefaloon where he had the Abbey of Thelema, where he has a circle and triangle painted on the ground where they're actually joined together. The triangle is part of the circle, which is, you know, an interesting innovation. Not something I'd recommend people try, but I mean, well, not out of the gate anyway. But it's evidence that Crowley did do that. If you look at some of the circles that he's described for his evocations, you can see the names that he has around, and in one of them he has the name of his girlfriend in there as well as like the names of gods and his protective entities. Usually you'll put whatever protective entity, you know, you're kind of working with. You work with any of the pagan gods, you put that. If you look at the traditional Goetic things, they have prayers from the Book of Psalms written out on the ground, and that's significant as well. Some of them get very elaborate. Like if you look at the traditional Goetic circle, it's huge. it would take quite a bit of chalk to put that thing together. And I do recommend, like, writing out prayers, putting the names of gods, stuff like that, whatever you can bring to the table to focus the spiritual energy that you're trying to create, and to call down whatever you think you would use to protect you from whatever you evoke. Personally, for me, for a circle, I plan on out of the box. What I have is a rope that I've knotted 78 times while going through the tarot, and I went through the tarot 10 times. Yeah, 10 times with this cord, and essentially made a knot for each card as I was saying something about the card, and then untie the knots, go back through, and then go back through. I got this idea from the Tao Te Ching, where Lao Tzu talks about how the only tool for memory one shouldn't need to write, he says at one point. One should just need to knot a cord as you have the idea, and then you unknot the cord and recover the idea. That gave me the idea to put ideas into these knots. So I did it repeatedly, and then eventually, when I felt like I had got it down enough, I melted, because it's like nylon rope, so I melted both ends and put them together, so it became something that I could actually put around my body and walk around in, which is key, because for space, I don't always have the space that I'd like, and B, just because I like to move around when I'm doing rituals, and I don't like to be confined to one space. But then again, like I say, I started doing this 5 years in. I did circles on the ground before that, and I encourage people to at least start out that way and come up with whatever innovations later. Robes are, again, it's very much the same idea. You're putting your identity out there. Crowley describes the AA robes that people have for different grades. So that's fairly cut and dry. OTO is fairly cut and dry like that. A plain black robe is usually good, although I would definitely suggest putting the hexagram and pentagram that are described in the Lesser Key of Solomon on it for any evocation. essentially, and the sigil for the spirit. You want the sigil for the spirit to be somewhere on your robes, so that you are identified in a certain way with the entity that's in the triangle, whatever the material basis for evocation might be. And just and it's also like, just if you're going to do ceremonial magic, you don't want to just do it in street clothes. You don't want to just do it in whatever you look like normally, because you want to create a distance between your normal mental liminal space and the space that you're inhabiting when you do the ritual. There should be a certain amount of change, and the robe is just a perfect tool for doing that.
Does it always have to be a black robe? Is there any flexibility in terms of colors? Or
Oh yeah, in some traditions they use a white robe, and in different grades of the AA, Crowley suggests different robes. And if you're using ritual, if you're using color as a part of your ritual, that could be key. Like if you're doing something fire-based, maybe you wear a red robe or something like that. And there's different parts of different scriptures which describe different robes for different occasions, essentially. I say a black robe just because it's easier to come by than anything else, and it doesn't stain. But yeah, there is flexibility, and it depends on the meaning that you imbue it with. I do have a fairly plain black robe that I use, although for most of my things I have tattoos. Just because it annoyed me to be constantly pinning hexagrams and pentagrams to my robes, so I just got them tattooed on my body. So now I just display that, and that's my way of identifying myself.
Do you find that like as far as having the symbols on you, like using a lamen for that purpose?
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about the lamen too. Yeah, and that's actually, why not talk about the lamen now? Yeah, the lamen is one of the most personal tools that a magician will use. I find, because it is a personal expression of you, whereas the robe is more of a protective and identification thing in terms of like the greater forces, the pentagram and the hexagram, whereas the lamen is very personal. It has to do with the magician itself.
So that's like the interior as opposed to the robe being the exterior.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
what is that? What is this robe?
It's called the lamen. It's essentially hung over the heart, or put over the heart. Lamen. And it should be a reflection of the magician's personal attainments, whatever is significant to that person. Personally, for me, I actually just take the copy of the Book of the Law that I got during my initiation, and a replica of the Stellar of Revealing, and I buckle them over my heart with a belt, and I use that. But that's fairly generic. That's mostly because I haven't come up with a decent lamen yet. More so than because, but it is effective as a tool in that respect. So whatever's significant to the person, which is actually, and one other tool which is very similar, which Crowley doesn't discuss, but I use extensively, is the phylactery. The idea of using scriptures placed over one's head. We call it the Ajna chakra.